between looking at clashes in Jerusalem between police and protesters demonstrating against the government of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Demonstrators marched on Monday to demand the resignation of the Prime Minister and call for fresh elections. They're also demanding a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, as well as the safe return of all remaining hostages. According to local media, tens of thousands flocked to the streets of Jerusalem and gathered outside the Knesset and Mr. Netanyahu's residence. The rally took a downturn when police began firing water cannons to disperse the protesters.
Everybody in our country can see that things are going very, very badly. Thousands of people have died, and this has got to stop. You see, this government is destroying our country, so we have to remove them. The government is not managing it well. Time is stalled, and Hamas should have been destroyed much faster, and they are just stalling time. They don't think about who will control the Gaza Strip after that. So we will have a sustainable future with the people of Gaza living in their place and we living in our place, and people not hurting each other. They're not thinking about it. They just waste time.
Protest is against our government, who is really totally local. Really everything don't work, and we must replace it in, of course, democratic matters. Nothing is working. From the 7 before the war, and all the ministers are really totally local, what you say in Spanish. And when the war started in the 7th of October, the government didn't do nothing. Nothing has worked, so brother in arms, we do our best to help everybody. We built a tremendous logistics center who give help to all the persons who run away from the area around Gaza.
I think it's time for a change in Israel, and we need new elections so that the new government can get the trust of most of the people in Israel. I think that's a major reason, and hopefully this will help get back the people that are taken hostage in the Gaza Strip.
In a related development, Israel believes there's no longer need for a war cabinet after the surprise resignation of former Defense Minister Benny Gantz. It's the assertion of Israel's National Directorate of Public Diplomacy spokesperson David Mencer in a video address in Tel Aviv. Mr. Mencer noted that the war cabinet was a requirement for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to create a national unity government.
As I've made clear in this briefing, the war cabinet was a prerequisite of creating this national unity government. It was a prerequisite put in by member of Knesset Benny Gantz. With Mr. Gantz leaving the government, there is no longer a need for the war cabinet, and its duties will be taken over as mandated by the State of Israel by the Security Cabinet, together with the full cabinet.
Mr. Mencer's comments come after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced he was dissolving the cabinet on Saturday evening. The dissolution comes after key figures such as centrist opposition leader Benny Gantz and his ally Gadi Eisenkot resigned days ago, saying Netanyahu's leadership was preventing them from approaching true victory. A spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces said that as far as it was concerned, the move will not affect the chain of command. I want to bring in geopolitical analyst Edward Okpa. He's in Texas in the United States. Edward, thanks for joining us on the program today. This is a risky move, isn't it, even for Prime Minister Netanyahu? He's been known in the past to have clear war strategies. He's executed them effectively. Why has it been difficult for him to record such success with this team?
Oh, thank you for having me. I think the reason for that, in my own interpretation, is that Netanyahu is a warmonger and he doesn't like anybody to challenge him. I think he was getting this challenge, a pushback from the war cabinet, and then he sees that as, he doesn't agree with it. He doesn't see that as a way for him to do what he wanted to do personally, as opposed to what is in the best interest for Israel and those in Hamas. So he decided. So once these people were pushed and they saw there was no path forward for success, they had to resign. And then, he's going to default to the security cabinet, which is a permanent one. And those people in the security cabinet obviously are his supporters, and they want this war to go on. Because they're opposed to some of the proposals for a ceasefire. So, there's a political reason behind Netanyahu doing this. He doesn't want to have an election because there are chances if he goes to an election, he's going to lose. And then he's going to also, there's a corruption issue going on against him that he doesn't want to, have to come up during this time. So he's doing everything most politicians do, to push back on things that are going to negatively come against him.
It does appear, though, the members of the cabinet are overwhelmed with the number of deaths of civilians in Gaza, as propagated by Gaza health officials, and then the UN and other human rights groups are also propagating, these numbers going up every day. The Israeli government has been under pressure to call a ceasefire to reduce the number of civilian deaths. But does it seem impossible to do so, given that Hamas fighters are always positioning themselves amongst civilian populations?
Well, Hamas is not a formalized military. It's not military like you and I know it. Hamas is a freedom fighter, and so they're going to deploy and use tactics, just to forestall what Israel is going to do. It calls to question the Israel military might for Hamas to have done what they did October 7th and are still holding on to some hostages. So that is just something that is embarrassing to Netanyahu, and he's doing everything because he's afraid that if this ceasefire were to happen, and then we call an inquiry, and then they're going to show that under his leadership that, the worst case against Israelis ever happened. So what he's doing now is a safe face. He's trying to remain a hero, but, with all these civilian casualties on both sides and the world putting pressure on Israel to do something other than, just destroying life and property in Hamas. I think Netanyahu is getting the heat. But again, his ego gets in the way. And he doesn't want to, step down. He doesn't want to, see the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah, clearly he wants to stay till the end of the war. And now he says he's going to constitute a smaller group, to help with, decision-making as regards the war. But is he narrowing the perspectives he'll be getting on the war itself?
Well, he's going to surround himself with his own kitchen cabinet, and those kitchen cabinet members are going to be those who see him and agree with what he wants to do. If you go back to when George Bush pushed the war against Iraq, and he came up with the weapon of mass destruction, what did he do? He has to have Colin Powell and all those other people go before the United Nations and make a case. And we found out later on that was all false. There wasn't anything there. So that's what Netanyahu is doing. He's trying to get, or he's going to get those warmongers. Remember, in every society, there are those who just enjoy the the chaos of war, because their power get enlarged and they make some money. Don't ever forget the fact that money is also a motivating factor, because those who supply the arms or those who sell the arms make money. So that's what you're going to expect with this smaller group of people that are going to surround Netanyahu and encourage him, egg him on. And at the end of the day, whenever this war ends, Netanyahu is still going to be held accountable. How that happens, we don't know, but he's still going to be held accountable, because this is just unnecessary. Granted that every nation has the right to defend themselves, and Hamas has the right to defend themselves, even though they're not a formalized group like the national army. But they have to fight for their people, and they're doing it the best way they can, giving all the odds against them.
You talked about the politics of this earlier when you mentioned that Netanyahu is facing, some real challenges in Israel as regards the war. And then, his own position is also a bit shaky right now because people are calling for him to step down. What do you think would happen in the near future? You think he's going to give in to those demands, even though he said, he wants to see this through? He really wants to see those hostages returned home at the end of the day.
Well, one thing is for every individual to have a wish. The other one is to see those around you to, who go along with that wish. So Netanyahu's wish is that he's going to see to the end of this. But if the people around him are saying, Mr. Prime Minister, this is unnecessary, this is uncalled for, we have stretched it, we have gone beyond what is reasonable, you have to step back, then, he's going to see, the heat is going to be on him, and then he's going to bow down somehow. If U.S., hopefully, when we have an election, in a few months, and he sees the handwriting on the wall, he might just, go. So I don't have a crystal ball, but I think Netanyahu, and what is his name? The guy in Russia are probably the world most hated, head of government at this moment. Even though they have justification for what they're doing, but we are human beings, and people are just don't like the fact that civilian lives and properties are being destroyed because of an ego of somebody. Netanyahu has an ego. He's very unnecessarily stubborn. He tries to step on everything just to make a case that Israel has the right to live. Everybody else has the right to live. At some point, you're going to have to sit down and even negotiate a peaceful coexistence with your own enemy. If not, you're going to have an unending situation that's just going to keep angering people and wasting lives.
Edward, thanks again for your analysis and your thoughts and opinions.
Thank you for having me.